Today is the first day of SEC Media Days, and there's going to be a lot of news to come out of this. And I've talked a little bit about Texas, a lot about Oklahoma. We'll talk more about Oklahoma. We'll talk more about Texas as they are the newest members of the 16-team SEC and joining a league that has won 13 of the last 20 national championships. And a big reason as to why, perhaps the most important reason as to why that we are focused on the SEC and in particular this year is Alabama, okay? So for those of y'all that have been living under that particular rock, Nick Saban showed up to Alabama in 2007 and turned them into a juggernaut in short order. He is the most successful college football coach of all time, and I believe the greatest college football coach of all time. Did it at LSU, won a national championship. Did it at Alabama, won several national championships. And then last year, after leading Alabama past Georgia in the SEC title game, coming back from the dead against Auburn, they made the college football playoff against Michigan in the Rose Bowl and fell 2 yards short of sending that game into overtime and perhaps winning another championship with what might be the least talented Alabama team that Nick Saban would have had to win a national championship. But that's just not how it went down. Michigan went 15-0. And in that national championship game, they got to play against a Washington team that was also legitimately awesome with Michael Penix Jr. at wide receiver, a first-round draft pick. Michael Penix Jr. at quarterback, a first-round draft pick. Rome Odunze at wide receiver, a first-round draft pick. And they seem to have put together an outstanding run in just a short amount of time with a coach that all he does is win. So Kalen DeBoer showed up to Washington from Fresno State, from Indiana, from Sioux Fall, and turned that program into a winner in what last year was a loaded Pac-12. I think that was the strongest Pac-12 season that we've seen for quite some time. We got to take it back a little bit further than I want to say 2006 for the last time I felt this good about how deep the Pac-12 was. And then, after finishing runner-up in the national championship with the Washington Huskies, about 9 days later, Nick Saban shocks the college football world by saying he's going to retire, January 10th. And then, in short order, we come to find out that Kalen DeBoer has been offered and accepted the job at Alabama, which at the time and still right now, to my feeling, it's the most difficult job to succeed in the 155-year history of the sport. Like, full stop, guys. Like, I've been saying for years, and others have said for years, following Nick Saban is not going to be fun. He's Nick Saban. It's Alabama. Alabama is a program that must win, okay? It has to win. They will fire you for losing to Auburn. The way that Ohio State fans feel about Ryan Day is the way that Alabama fans feel about Alabama full-time. Right? I should say the way that Ohio State fans feel about Ohio State also is how Alabama fans feel about Alabama all the time. Jimbo Fisher tried to take on the head coaching job as the offensive coordinator at LSU at UAB. And the regents at Alabama put a stop to that because Jimbo Fisher was a good enough coach to turn the Blazers into a monster, and they couldn't afford to have anybody competing with Alabama football because that is the economy in the state. And as he has won, Alabama has gotten better all across the board. For the folks that continue to say that football doesn't matter, when Nick Saban arrived at Alabama, the ACT score was below 30 on average. By 2017, that's the average ACT score. They had gone from 4,400 incoming freshmen to over 7,000 in 2017. All this because people want to be associated with a winner. I wrote more about this at foxsports.com. For those that want to know. So Kalen DeBoer is tasked with continuing to win at the level that Nick Saban won. Not at the level of anybody else. Not even at his level. But there's a reason as to why I think he can lead Alabama to a national championship in year one. The first reason is, as I said, he's a winner. 104-12 as a head coach. 3 national championships at Sioux Fall, the NAIA level. And then turned a off-injured Michael Penix Jr. into a Heisman finalist and had one of the most prolific offenses in the sport. And he seems to be able to keep a cool head because he's seen so much, and he's come up through the mud. He's come up through the hard way. And we got a lot of respect for that over here. I know you do too. He got to Washington. People thought that he would stay there, especially with Washington joining the Big Ten. Alabama called. But I thought the thing that was most interesting about him accepting the job at Alabama is Nick Saban and Miss Terry, that's tandem, and you need their support, have been all in on Kalen DeBoer from the very beginning. Saban still keeps an office over there, the football building. And Kalen DeBoer wants him in there all the time. He's not intimidated by the presence of Nick Saban around the program. He still thinks of it as his program and need to pick up where he left off. He likes being the successor, and he's inherited it the way that King James inherited the throne from Queen Elizabeth. You want to do the good job because you're following the greatest of all time, and the greatest of all time has tapped you to do a good job. Another reason I think that they could make the college football playoff playoff and then win the national championship. Jalen Milroe's good. I want to see if Jalen Milroe can take the leap. That's all, man. Like, I've been high on Jalen Milroe from the moment he left Katie Tompkins. He'll still do some things every now and again that have you scratching your head, but the way that he played against LSU, the way that he played against Auburn toward the end, 4th and 31, finding Isaiah Bond in the back of the end zone, getting that win against Georgia, he has a extremely high ceiling, right? It's bringing up the floor for him. You can't get benched this season. It's not going to be a good look. But also that the schedule is one in which it's not especially difficult. It's also not especially easy, right? They're going to get an interesting week 1 opener against Western Kentucky because Tyson Helton is going to have a dude out there that I think is going to be able to sling it just a little bit, right? TJ Finley's coming from Texas State, had been at LSU, probably going to be the starting quarterback at Western Kentucky, and they like to move the ball around. You'll remember Austin Reed was throwing for all sorts of records at Western Kentucky. They'll get South Florida again, who I think is going to be a decent challenge again for them. And then they start their SEC conference play, and that is going to be interesting for me to watch because it's not just that they get to host Georgia at Alabama. They go to Oklahoma, right? That's another one on their schedule. They don't have to play an Ole Miss this year, so that's one thing. I think that Ole Miss is more excited about that than Alabama, but it's there for them. There's nobody on their schedule that I don't think that Alabama and Kalen DeBoer can't beat. I also think that the job that he did to put together the roster and the staff, given the upheaval in the sport, we're going to talk about that later, but we need to talk about it now just so we know where we're at in SEC Media Days, because on January 11th, wasn't real sure what Alabama football was going to be, but we did know this. The portal opened for Alabama football players at a time when it was closed to literally everybody else. Okay, your head coach retires, takes another job, gets fired. As a player, you had 30 days to go shopping in the transfer portal. And many did. Caleb Downs ends up at Ohio State. Roydell Williams ends up at Florida State. We can keep going down the list. Terrence Ferguson ends up at Florida State. A lot of guys dispersed from that Alabama team that was so good. And I had a worry there that the talent was just going to go down, because why would you stay there if you showed up to play for Nick Saban and not necessarily showed up to play for Alabama, which is valid, by the way. I mean, there's a lot of folks that are playing at Alabama because Nick Saban's there, not because it's Alabama. But how did he bounce back, right? After losing his offensive coordinator that he wanted to bring with him from Washington to a literal NFL job doing the same thing, he goes and he gets Nick Sheridan, right? He puts together a defensive staff that's pretty damn good, right? Kane Wommack and Mo Linguist. And he kept Malachi Moore, right? He's gone shopping in recruiting and done well. He's brought in guys that he likes, like Parker Brailsford from Washington, right? I think they got dudes over there in a way that I didn't think they would have dudes over there by this time this year. Like, I just didn't think that Kalen DeBoer would be able to recruit at the level he's been able to recruit. I'm happy to be wrong about that. I think that him keeping a cool head about this and using all the advantages that are there for him at Alabama has also done wonders for their chances of winning the national championship in 2024. And his overall not getting shook up, not too high, not too low, wanting his players to go out there and win football games mentality is one I think all of us can get behind. It's remarkable, honestly, keeping that squad together, keeping that program intact. I know that he'd had a lot of help. I know that Nick Saban has done a lot to help him as well, but there are a lot of guys that would not be able to stuff their egos to try to go win football games, and that's what football is about. It's about stuffing your ego so that we can all go win football games. I'm very, very excited to see what Alabama can do under year one of Kalen DeBoer. Huge Kalen DeBoer fan. And yeah, I think they are more than capable of winning the national championship in 2024 if they just play to their talent and coach to their talent. They got a guy that is the man that can lead them to the promised land. If you like the channel, consider subscribing. We're marching toward 100,000.